This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Ibn Jansen. The show is very much live. It's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also streaming live on YouTube right now, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel all of the time. Today, Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene faces his first major baptism of fire as he delivers a budget speech that could see a hike in some taxes. What do you think about that at SABC Newsroom? South Africans should also brace themselves for a hike in the prices of basic food items. Then corruption remains a problem, and we ask, why is it not going away? We also talk to the Egyptian ambassador about the conflict in Libya. And we close today with a young racing sensation, Ryan Rueda. He's on his way to Europe next week. We'll talk to him shortly. But first, let's get the day's news from Anine Domal.
Well, good morning. I'm Anine Domal. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene is expected to confirm changes to the Provident and pension funds when he delivers his budget speech this afternoon. The government has proposed that Provident funds be administrated on the same principles as a pension fund. This will mean that employees who resign from a job will not be able to access their money until retirement age. The minister is also expected to raise taxes and to dedicate a large section of his budget to solving the power crisis. Leaked intelligence documents obtained by news network Al Jazeera revealed there was a plot to assassinate African Union chairperson Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in Ethiopia after she assumed the position in 2012. Sudan was suspected of being behind the plot. The documents form part of hundreds of secret intelligence papers from spy agencies which have been leaked to Al Jazeera. According to the cable, South African intelligence officials were alerted to an imminent threat to Dlamini Zuma's life in October 2012. Residents in Thembehile in Lenasia have threatened to resume protests today if municipal officials do not visit the area to address them. Police are still monitoring the situation in the area following yesterday's protest. Residents took to the streets, barricading roads with burning tires and rocks in what is reported to have been protests over poor service delivery. A number of people have been arrested following the looting of foreign-owned shops at Marikana Informal Settlement in Philippi on the Cape Flats. It's reported that the looting started after an altercation between members of the civil rights group Siskona People's Movement and a Somali shop owner. The People's Movement has since condemned the looting of the shops owned by foreign nationals in Philippi.
We told them that it is wrong to take the law in your hand. It is wrong to come and attack the foreign nationals who are based here in Cape Town, who own the shop. Whoever behind that, that must be condemned with the strongest possible terms ever.
Meanwhile, the South African Human Rights Commission wants to probe the reasons for the rise in service delivery protests. That's after a string of public complaints about government officials and entities failing them. The HRC has now summoned government representatives to appear before the Commission. Today is the final day of the Commission's national hearings on housing and local government. Then in cricket, Ireland fought back well in their Cricket World Cup match against the United Arab Emirates in Brisbane this morning. The UAE batted first and started well, but they were pegged by disciplined Irish bowling. The latest score there is 262 for 7. Remember, all of those stories are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anine. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene will present the 2015-16 budget to Parliament today. The budget comes in light of the weakening rand against the American dollar, and as investors' risk appetite remained tentative across the globe despite a rescue deal for debt-ridden Greece. Traders and analysts predicted a potentially volatile week for the rand with the release of promising GDP and trace data, as well as Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene's budget speech. Now, for an update, we are now joined from Cape Town by our economics anchor, Francis Hurd. A very good morning to you, Francis. Thank you for joining us.
Morning to you, Eben. It's a beautiful day here in Cape Town.
It's going to be a tough day, though, for the finance minister. Do you see this as his biggest test yet?
Yeah, look, he comes in at a tough time, and we always say that the finance minister, whoever it is, has a tough balancing act to do. He really does on his first budget speech. If we look back, Eben, Trevor Manuel, we look back now and it looks like the golden years. You know, we had spare cash, we could save. Pravin Gordhan came in, we then had a downturn. But because government had been careful in the good years, so we had saved, and Pravin Gordhan could say that we are going to adopt a counter-cyclical stance. So even though the economy is tightening up, government decided to spend, and that was a lifeline for many, especially the social grants and things like that. But what happened is through those years, government took on more and more debt. So Nhlanhla Nene comes in at a time when we still have low growth, we still have unemployment, we still have all these problems, but government has taken on too much debt, and they're worried that that's a dangerous situation. So he doesn't want to take on any more debt. He wants to curb spending, and it's believed that he will in fact have to up our taxes because simply there's not enough money coming in to fund what government needs to take care of. So the question is, where's the tax going to come from?
That's the key question. There's a lot of speculation around VAT going up, and where else do you think there could be small little increments? And can we afford it?
Well, we have to. I think that is going to be a tough one, and government will probably avoid that. That is because even the poor spend a greater proportion of their income on things like food. They spend more in the stores they have left to save. So VAT hits the poor more. So we have a low VAT rate, 14%, unlikely to go up unless government maybe looks at higher VAT for luxury goods. So you're targeting the richer echelons. And here's the nub. It looks like there could be a wealth tax in a sense that the upper tax bracket, that increment, that percentage could go up. It's currently 40%, or there may be even a new tax bracket for people earning over $1 million. The other trick up his sleeve for Nhlanhla Nene is the fuel levy. So currently we have a fuel levy, but of course there's a little bit of room to maneuver because the oil prices come down, our petrol prices come down. So that's where he could add on maybe 60 cents. That's the big speculation. Add on 60 cents, and it won't hurt us as much as it would have hurt us a few years ago. The final tax that we can look at is corporate tax, which is 28%. He's unlikely to touch corporate tax because what we're seeing, unfortunately, Eben, is that corporates aren't making the profits they used to, and they're not bringing in the amounts to the coffer. What we really need is confidence among business, so unlikely to hit corporates.
It's always important at this time for us to find out what the investors in our country want to hear. What are the analysts saying about that?
Well, it's mixed. Of course, you get Labour saying we want more spending. Business really wants certainty, clarity around a lot of regulations. So it's not specifically related to tax. Of course, I think business would be devastated if government started raising corporate taxes at a time when corporates are uncertain, when they're not investing, they're not creating jobs. So they really want corporates to be left alone. Some are even warning that if you target those wealthy people earning more than $1 million per year, you could constrain entrepreneurship, you could constrain investment. So government really is between a rock and a hard place because whatever they do, the economy could suffer even if you only target those wealthy people. I think a wealth tax would be accepted, especially when we have so much inequality. Business, I think, right now wants Nhlanhla Nene to make strong statements, to shift sentiment, because there is a feeling that we're not open to investment, that we're not business friendly. So they just want the right noises. And of course, we want to know what's happening with Eskom. So that's another big theme. He will talk about the 23 billion, which is a plug that government is going to give Eskom. But is it enough? A lot of business is saying, why can't we bring in outside investors. Government has spoken about strategic privatization, maybe selling off a few assets. I think a lot of business people would love it if government said, let's give away a big chunk of Eskom because we need capital to come in and invest in what we need for the future. As long as they get returns and we regulate them, that's a possibility. I don't know if Nhlanhla Nene would say anything like that. It's ideologically not palatable to move from where we've been to some would say quite a strong state control to radical privatization. But maybe we'll hear of some state assets being sold, and I think business would really welcome that.
Francis, thank you very much for that update. That's Francis Hurd, that's our economics anchor. She'll keep us updated throughout the rest of the day on this very platform as to how the budget speech develops. And then, of course, the kind of fallout and reaction to that. I'm sure there'll be plenty. It'll be a tough balancing act for the Finance Minister, Stanjwa, today. But let's take a look at your tweets. What are you talking about? At SABC Newsroom, that's where we are at. Prashant says, waiting for the budget session. Yes, it'll be live on this very channel, Prashant. You better come and watch it on SABC News. Bruce Wine says, you call it the budget speech, I call it the real state of the nation. That's an interesting take on it. Fake Lebogang Mabuza says, I'm hoping for no increase in personal income and sin tax. That's it. Well, I think you might be surprised today, Lebogang. Kaya Kumalo says, budget 2015, I expect Minister Nene to touch on the widening budget deficit and more funds for renewable energy. Well, we've had a widening budget deficit since 2009, more than 5 years now. And yes, it's becoming a problem increasingly. However, another problem. South Africans could be forced to dig deep into their pockets to pay for basic foods. Maize, which is a staple diet in most households, could shoot up, and this is due to adverse weather conditions facing the north and northeastern parts of South Africa. According to reports, the price of white maize has increased by 17.5% a tonne, with economists already predicting a possible VAT hike as well, which has remained unchanged since 1993. Of course, this is ahead of the much-anticipated budget speech that will be delivered later today. The coming months could prove to be a challenge for consumers. Now, from Grain SA, we are joined by the CEO, Mr. Jannie de Villiers. Good morning, Mr. de Villiers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Eben.
How much grain do we currently have? Do we at least have enough for our own market? Is that the crisis like that?
Yeah, I think we're going to have a challenge. The official number for the crop comes out tomorrow by the Department of Agriculture, so we will only tomorrow afternoon know exactly what is their estimates. But I got some good reports that early this morning the farmers will start messaging in and said that they received some rain last night, although a big part of the crop has already been damaged permanently and it won't help for that. But I think we are now sort of at the brink of having just enough or just short. But we know that there has been already some ships ordered for South Africa to be imported, especially yellow maize in the Western Cape.
Does that mean we're going to see more imports than normal, or is it fairly similar this time around?
No, last year we've exported almost 2 million tons. We had a bumper crop last year. I think it was the second highest ever. But this year we will definitely import some maize, and this is very strange to South Africa. I think, you know, the last big drought that we had was in 1992. So this is actually a very, different situation than normal.
Budget speech today. What's the expectation from your side if there is an increase in taxes?
Yeah, I think maybe in personal taxes, but I hope that it's not going to be on the business side, on the company taxes. We need the economy to grow, and I think as a nation we need to encourage the job creation. This is a huge challenge for us, and for that reason I think we need to rather stimulate and allow those businesses to grow to absorb the job creation.
And what about price increases in maize this year? When do you expect that, and how much do you expect?
Yeah, even normally when you talk like white maize going into millet meal and millet pop, those things normally take about 3 months to work through the system because the processes have some pipeline stocks available. We expect that to happen about 3 months, in 3 months' time. When you talk chicken, you know, the poultry business, eggs, dairy, those things who are all fed by maize, they normally take a little bit longer because they've got a longer processing time. So hopefully, you know, we will have a better idea, because at the moment it is a weather-driven market. It's speculation all the time. You know, as soon as there's rain forecast, then the prices drop. If there's no rain, then the prices goes up. And it is by, you know, extreme margins. So hopefully, you know, by the end of the week, we will have a better idea what the crop is like, and there will be some calmness coming to the market, and then, only then, we will be able to start forecasting about the food prices properly.
And what about the effect of other factors on production, things like load shedding? Have you guys been affected quite badly by it?
Yeah, we produce about 20% of our yellow maize under irrigation. And a lot of those farmers, you know, they had damages because of the load shedding. In some instances, you know, the pumps pump all the water into the different canals. And the moment that the canals are full and the farmers can start pumping and irrigating, then the power goes off again. So there was really some problem areas. And those guys produce a lot per hectare because of the irrigation water available. So yes, we also had some damage on that, but it's not that substantial. I think the biggest part was the dry land conditions and the very dry parts for especially the white maize producing areas of Northwest Free State and Northwest Province.
Thank you for joining us. We hope when the numbers come out tomorrow that the numbers look good, Mr. de Villiers. Thank you for joining us. That's Mr. Jannie de Villiers. He's the CEO of Grain SA. And he says, well, after the recent rains of the last couple of days, the outlook is not as bad as they thought. But we'll see the numbers tomorrow, and hopefully they'll be pretty good. Time for us to take a look now what's happening elsewhere in the world, what's happening in the rest of the globe. Now, in Hong Kong, the South China Morning Post reports that the Electoral College for the 2022 chief executive election could be expanded from 1,200 members to 1,600. And with new sectors that include women and young people, then the Times is leading with ministers are privately urging David Cameron to bring Boris Johnson back into the fray. Yeah, the former mayor of London. This will rejuvenate the Conservative election campaign. And closer to home in Nigeria, the Vanguard is reporting President Goodluck Jonathan is consoled relations of Bayelsa women leaders who died in an accident at Ahoda Rivers Estate at a recent mass funeral. Well, let's take a quick look at our picture of the day. Today it comes from Jermaine Klicher. The bus that was hanging over the bridge in Braamfontein this morning has fallen. That's the picture. Hashtag SABC News. Thank you to Jermaine for sending us that picture. She reports that the bus has now finally fallen. We can confirm, of course, there were no passengers in that bus. Let's now take a look at what is happening across the country. Our diary, yes, she comes. It up. Yep, before the budget speech is delivered this afternoon, the National Union of Metal Workers Deputy General Secretary Carl Kluter and the United Front's Wafa Abdurrahman will lead a march to Parliament to hand over a memorandum to Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene. That'll happen at 11 a.m. this morning. We stay in the mother city. The Finance Minister, of course, will present his budget speech at 2 p.m. this afternoon in the National Assembly in Parliament. That'll be live on this very channel. Then in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, the Special Investigating Unit's civil claim against Nkandla architect Minenhle Makanya will continue today. Keep you updated as to all those develop right here on this channel. You're watching SABC News. This is Newsroom. We'll be back shortly.
It's a favorite minister here. Yane, party is a very nice language because it was written by you, the people. Here's a good one. Pry hard, an individual who pries against all odds. Hoy! Give me water!
Lead the way with a bottle of Scottish Leader for $119.99 and help make party South Africa's 12th official language. Tops at Spar. Shake things up.
personal expression that evokes a flame from within.
Street art, it's a vast concept.
Dancing is one of the main art forms on the streets of Africa. Regardless of how it is done, the streets remain expressive. A passionate artist in the central business district of Johannesburg.
Yeah, I've been doing this it's been 7 years or 8 years now.
Brains lost control on what to do then. Words dispute in the mouth of a woman.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Names have been mentioned at the Arms Deal Commission, among them Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Tony Blair and Tony Georgiades.
Terry Crawford Brown has been making the loudest noise. From taking the president to the highest court in the land to grilling witnesses in the first phase of the hearings.
Commissioners have adopted a tough stance with witnesses, compelling them to back up claims and produce evidence.
Do you know those MPs? I know some of them, but really, sir, I would not think it was appropriate to disclose their names publicly.
Your World, weekdays at 9 p.m.
Is a personal expression that evokes a flame from within.
Street art, it's a vast concept.
Dancing is one of the main art forms on the streets of Africa. Regardless of how it is done, the streets remain expressive. A passionate artist in the central business district of Johannesburg.
Yeah, I've been doing this it's been 7 years or 8 years now.
Brains lost control on what to do then. Words dispute in the mouth of a woman.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
What the hell was that?
They call themselves Ambition and they're taking Josie by storm.
Ambition is the best room Zanzi's ever seen.
It's about time that people like us now come out, and it's not even about me saying I'm the best of anything, but it's about time that artists like myself come out in a trained environment to give the people the quality they deserve.
Trying to get that cash, I'm trying to get that cash with a punchline. Trying to get that cash, I'm trying to get that cash.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT. Zoom into Africa. This is Senegal. The president is Mr. Macky Sall. Senegal withdrew from the Mali Federation on 20 August in 1960. The population is more than 13 million people. One of the major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is CFA.
In Africa, mobile devices are tools to make payments, browse the internet, and keep governments in check with social media forums.
It's given an average African too much power in their hands.
And tech creativity is solving some of the continent's problems.
Everything is internet driven.
And on Network, we tell you how Africans are using technology and social media in their everyday lives.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has called for an urgent pan-Arab military force to combat terrorism. The call comes as attacks from Islamic State are on the increase. 21 Egyptian Christians were beheaded in neighboring Libya, and in retaliation, Egypt launched the bloodiest airstrikes, hitting 13 studied targets. Aside from militants over the border in Libya, President al-Sisi faces an insurgency on the Sinai Peninsula, where Islamic State's Egypt wing claimed responsibility for a series of attacks that killed over 30 members of the security forces in January. But London-based Amnesty International indicated that the Egyptian Air Force failed to take the necessary precautions and carry out an attack that killed 7 civilians in a residential neighborhood in the Libyan city of Derna. Egyptian ambassador to South Africa, Mr. Sharif Naguib joins us in our studio in Pretoria this morning. A very good morning to you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Mr. Ambassador, can you please give us an update on the standoff between Egypt and Libya, and what protection is there for Egyptians that are still living in Libya?
Well, of course, as you mentioned earlier, you are aware of the barbaric attack against 21 Egyptians who were cold-bloodedly massacred in front of the camera. The Egyptian reaction was to protect our Egyptian citizen, and it was in coordination with the Libyan government. And more measures are taken to protect those Egyptians, as well as in coordination with the Libyan government.
The President El-Sisi has called for a pan-Arab military force. Have you had any assistance on this call so far?
Well, the President would have never made such a proposal without previous consultation with many of our partners in the region. We believe that ISIS is becoming a real threat in Libya. If you recall, the beginning was last November. Now they control around 3 cities in Libya. It's becoming a regional threat, and we need a comprehensive approach that will take into consideration the aspiration of the people of Egypt and Libya for prosperity and peace.
What is your response to the accusations of you killing civilians in attacks on Libyan towns?
Well, there was no verified information about this information. What we have done was based on intelligence, very clear and intelligence reports, and in coordination with the Libyan government, and we have no information about civilian casualties. And let me recall something for you now, since we are talking about attacks on civilians. The same campaign was also taking place against Daesh, against ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
I want to move the conversation back to Egypt. Are you happy that within Egypt you have a handle on the situation with regards to ISIS militants operating within your borders?
Well, our military are taking all the necessary measures on the north of Sinai in order to deal with the scourge of terrorism there. And now we are dealing with it on the other side, with our borders with Libya. And the people in Egypt are very happy and satisfied with the campaign taken so far.
What about political stability in Egypt? Are you happy that you guys are on the road towards political stability, and would you look at time frames for the future?
Well, since you mentioned political stability, I have to tell you that the month of March is going to witness a very important steps in this regard. We will have the economic conference that will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh to promote Egypt and to promote the mega projects in Egypt. 180 companies from South Africa were invited. We call on them to come and participate, and actively. It's a good platform to liaise with their counterparts and to also have a clear idea about reform and projects on the table. That was the first event that we have in March. The second event is the beginning of the parliamentary election, which will start in March and will have a new parliament by June.
Finally, Mr. Ambassador, the relationship with South Africa, is that normalized now? Are you happy that your dealings with Pretoria are now in better standing?
Well, let me tell you something, that the relationship with South Africa has witnessed an important improvement because of the leaders of the two countries. They met on the margin of the United Nations General Assembly last September. Our ministers are in direct touch and consultation, and we are expecting more improvement towards our economic and political relation in the future.
I thank you very much for joining us today. That is the Egyptian ambassador to South Africa, Mr. Sharif Naguib, and we talked about all things, including ISIS, the security situation in Libya, and then cross-border raids out of Egypt there, where some civilians have been killed. Now, let's take a look at what's on our Newsroom Facebook page. Of course, there you'll see Mpumalanga's health sector is faced with an acute shortage of specialist doctors, among them orthopedic surgeons. This is more than 2,300 patients are reportedly on the waiting list to be treated by an orthopedic surgeon in the province. And South Africans have expressed an improved sense of optimism about the direction the country's headed in. This according to an ISPO's poll that was released yesterday. And of course, Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene, Minister Stanjwa, is expected to confirm changes to the Provident and pension funds when he delivers his budget speech a little bit later today. All of those stories and a whole lot more on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also visit our website. That's sabc.co.za/news for all the updates all of the time. This is Newsroom. We'll be back with Corruption Watch after a short break.
The judge slammed corruption in both the private and public sector. Referring to irregular and wasteful government expenditure, he said it could no longer go on.
The high-profile corruption scandal has dominated Spain's headlines in recent weeks. The scandal touching a nerve as Spain emerges from its downturn after a slew of corruption cases involving politicians and the king's sister.
Tourism is a vital part of the economy. It contributes about 5% to the country's GDP and is a significant contributor to various industries such as food production, retail and transport.
For all your business news, stay tuned to your favorite channel, SABC News, at 1 Monday to Friday.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just take a look at the news making headlines today. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene is expected to confirm changes to the Provident and pension funds when he delivers his budget speech this afternoon. The government has proposed that Provident funds be administrated on the same principles as a pension fund. This will mean that employees who resign from a job will not be able to access their money until retirement age. The minister is also expected to raise taxes and to dedicate a large section of his budget to solving the power crisis. Leaked intelligence documents obtained by news network Al Jazeera revealed there was a plot to assassinate African Union chairperson Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma in Ethiopia after she assumed the position in 2012. Sudan was suspected of being behind the plot. The documents form part of hundreds of secret intelligence papers from spy agencies which have been leaked to Al Jazeera. Residents in Tembelihle in Lenasia have threatened to resume protests today if municipal officials do not visit the area to address them. Police are still monitoring the situation in the area following yesterday's protests. Residents took to the streets barricading roads with burning tires and rocks in what is reported to have been a protest over poor service delivery. Remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page and on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lenin. Now, the organisation Corruption Watch acknowledges that corruption in South Africa is on the increase. In 2014 alone, the Special Investigative Unit identified 147 million rand in cash stroke assets potentially recoverable for the state in various investigations. In the same period, the SIU recovered 13.7 million rand in cash. The SIU referred 156 matters to the National Prosecuting Authority for criminal prosecution and has brought 56 matters to the attention of the respective state institutions for possible disciplinary action. Corruption Watch says many of the country's leaders act with impunity, although South Africa has an impressive range of laws and institutions to combat corruption. Most of the complaints of corruption received has to do with corruption at schools. The organization's executive director, Mr. David Lewis, is in the studio with us this morning. Good morning, Mr. Lewis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
What is the extent of the rabbit hole of corruption as uncovered by your organization here in South Africa?
Well, our report is reflecting the number of reports that we've received. And over the 3 years that we've been in existence, we've received about 8,000 reports. It's very difficult to measure the total cost of corruption anywhere. I feel about it, whatever it is, it's huge, and it's very much larger than the South African public are willing to tolerate. And I think it's very often forgotten that the real cost of corruption is in the massive erosion of trust that it generates between the public and their leaders in the public sector and private sector.
By saying that, often some people will call you alarmist and say that you're ringing unnecessary alarms around this. What kind of methodology do you then use to gauge this? And should we be harder, and should there be harsher penalties to deal with this?
To deal with corruption?
Yes.
Well, the legislation that we have prescribes very harsh penalties. You couldn't get a whole lot harsher than life imprisonment, for example. The problem is that they're not enforced, and so for most people wanting or considering engaging in corruption, the risk of actually being penalized for it must appear very low. And if you're politically well connected, the risk must seem very, very low indeed.
It's often sort of painted that corruption happens within the public sector, where it's painted around government officials. What about corruption in the private sector? Do you look at that as well?
Of course. I mean, corruption is not about the public sector. It's about public resources. It's about the abuse of public resources. So whoever abuses those resources, whether they come from the private sector or they come from the public sector, whether they are a traffic cop or a citizen paying a bribe to a traffic cop, there's almost inevitably, in cases of corruption, a private firm or private citizen involved in a public institution and a public official involved. But it's about public resources. If you have a problem with your cell phone account and it's between you and the cell phone provider, there are agencies to deal with that, but that's not our principal concern.
What is of concern, often we hear stories that the culture of doing business is becoming increasingly corrupt, with backhanders almost expected across the board. In your investigations, do you come across that?
Yes, that's vanilla corruption. That's the bread and butter of corruption. And sure, we often come across it. I mean, what is interesting is that public sector supply chains have been heavily compromised by corruption. And our view is that, and this comes from large businesses, that this is starting to infect private sector supply chains significantly, the same practices. So it's of real concern. You land up a country like India where procurement is corrupted across the board. That's a potential direction in which we may be headed.
That's the threat that we are facing. What about the role of the public? Are South Africans aware of the cost of corruption, firstly, and then what role they can play in dealing or coming to terms with this scourge?
I think that they increasingly are, and I think that that's the good news from our report, is that yes, it may show that corruption is on the increase. I think what it certainly shows is that people are a lot more willing to speak out against corruption. And even though it's not a sufficient condition for tackling corruption, we also need strong law enforcement agencies, we need political will, but you can't do it without public participation. And, in South Africa, levels of public participation in this issue are increasing, and I think levels of knowledge and sophistication and understanding of what corruption is increasing as well, and I think we play some small role in that.
In your report, there's some damning report around the role of government officials. Now, in South Africa, we often see government talks about how serious they are about dealing with corruption. Yet it looks like your report says the opposite. Why is that?
Well, I'm not so sure that our report says totally the opposite. I mean, we're in the 3 years of our existence, we're finding that public sector people and leaders are more and more concerned about corruption. The largest single demographic who report to us are public officials, actually. So there's a lot of concern in the public sector, but this is not uniform, and it's certainly not the case it would appear in the law enforcement agencies. So it's mixed, and above all, when senior public leaders, politicians, and officials appear to be getting away with the equivalent of murder in this field, then we have a problem.
Finally, the public needs to get involved. Once you've uncovered corruption, what are the next steps that you should take as a member of the public?
Well, it's not even really a matter of, and this is an interesting issue around the law, it's not even an interesting question of the steps you should take. In fact, Section 34 of the most important anti-corruption legislation that we have prescribes, on the pain of significant criminal sanction, that you have to report experiences of corruption. And so the steps are to report them to the police. If you feel uncomfortable with the police, as many people do, report them to us. Report them to the authorities when you trust them. I think that's really vitally important, that people should see reporting corruption even in relation to their colleagues as an act of, if you like, love for your country rather than hatred for the people that you're working with.
Well, I thank you for joining us today. That's the Executive Director of Corruption Watch here in South Africa, Mr. David Lewis, live in studio talking about corruption in general. And if you don't want to go to the police, go to Corruption Watch. They will help you. It is your duty as a South African to expose corruption by law, he says. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's have a quick look at your tweets. What are we talking about now? What are the issues that are coming in? Tabani says, it's about time Karma caught up with Metro Bus, the worst, most inconsiderate and dangerous drivers in Braamfontein. They make the taxis look all right, he says. Andrew Semwamadi says, but who could have got the Metro Bus driver to go over the edge? That's the picture that we showed you a little bit earlier on our pick of the day. Spilele says, seeing pictures of an overturned Metro Bus in the Johannesburg CBD while you're in a Metro Bus from Johannesburg to work ain't a pretty sight, ain't a pretty start to the day. I couldn't agree with you more, Spilele. That must be a little bit unnerving. Then, Go Molemo says, apparently no one, luckily, at Danny Boy. So how many people were at or in that Metro Bus? We can confirm nobody was injured. No passengers were in the bus. The driver did that all on his own, driving across a bridge in Braamfontein early in the morning. The facts are always stranger than fiction, isn't it? Finally, South African motorsport is said to be splashing in the pool of the big leagues this year with the driver behind the wheel, 19-year-old Ryan Roeder. Ryan will soon be racing in the United Kingdom and will be the first South African to be racing in the Mini Challenge series. The Power Maxed Mini Challenge is the championship for the new Mini in the United Kingdom for the last 10-12 years, and has always enjoyed great grids, colourful cars and fantastic close racing. He's with us in studio here today. Ryan, good morning, mate. Thank you for joining us.
Good thing.
Now you're on your way to Europe next year. You're going to be racing in the big leagues, as it were. You must be very excited and looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, even now, it's quite calming the nerves because it's, it's a big step up.
It's a big,
and it's we've just been fighting that to get there. So finally, it's happening. It's a dream come true.
Is this your first trip overseas? First trip going to be overseas, or?
This is my first long trip, so I'll be moving there on the 3rd of March. So I'll be permanently based there. So because, the father is strict on studies, so I have to complete the studies first. So.
I have to tell you, Mum and Dad's in studio here, and they've been very much on his case. So they get you to behave and make sure you don't step over the line. How are they going to keep a hand on you when you're on your own in the UK?
I can't give too much secrets. So odd phone call to say
the odd phone
okay,
call and a Skype message. Tell me about the mini league, the mini challenge that you're going to be racing in. That in itself is exciting, but it really is a platform to greater things for you, yeah?
Yes, no, it's basically this year in 2015, Mini Challenge launched a new F56 Mini. So it is to basically bring a baby touring car experience for young and up-and-coming drivers. So basically, it just sets me up to get to the dream of British touring cars. And, it gives the experience large crowds, so the media is big time involved, and as well as close racing, because it's identical cars. So at the end of the day, it's driver talent that comes into play. So, definitely want to be flying the South African flag high and, make a difference.
Tell me the difference. Here we see what the car looks inside. There you are. Just tell us the difference between racing the Mini and other racing events that you've come through.
Okay, basically this is, like I said, it's a baby touring car. So it's a full sequential gearbox, so foot flat, and you just pull on the lever up, shift, and makes nice noise. So that is always fantastic. You get a big grin under the helmet.
Yeah.
And basically you can see it's got quite a bit of aero on the car, so you get some downforce in high-speed corners. And in general, it's a proper built race car, and it's a pleasant to just drive it.
Tell me about where you started racing, the history. You come through karting, single-seaters, that sort of thing?
No, I went into karting, so as you can see the pictures now on the screen, that was in 2011, so that's Junior Max. Basically, I never went for the single-seater route. I was always interested in saloon cars,
Bigger engines,
yes.
Bigger noise.
And, the body rolling two-wheeling over the apexes, that is the dream. So that's why I went saloon cars.
And long-term future, what would you want to do? You want to be in Formula One one day? You want to race DTM? It looks like
DTM is definitely there, but I would say FIA World Endurance Championship. It's a long-time dream of mine to compete in 24 Hours of Le Mans. So for it to come through, I think then if I do that, then I can call my career.
Let's talk about the sport in South Africa. It's very difficult and it's very expensive to be racing in South Africa. How difficult has it been for you to raise money, raise sponsorship and so forth, including this tour that you're going on?
Motorsport in South Africa has become, it is a bit on the downhill. I can't comment, I haven't got any say. But that's why I think we make the move overseas where young drivers can make an opportunity and make a career for themselves. And basically, we have companies like Nicky Log, it's a Johannesburg-based earth-moving company. And they've supported us, and, without them, we wouldn't be in UK. And, it's companies like these who come along really make dreams, possible and just give young South African drivers the opportunity.
Tell me about where you grew up and how the people in the community support you.
Yeah, I grew up in Florida, so that's most where I was born. Basically, most of my family is based in Cape Town. It's just my brother, my father, and my mother, we in Joburg. So, they're very supportive at home. They always come to the races, although my mother doesn't watch too often. The nerves is that my father gets a bit twitchy on the
I can't imagine, but I'm sure they're very proud of what you do. All the best for next week when you leave for the UK. I'm sure you're gonna win lots of races there. Apparently, Colin tells me that you're very fast.
No, definitely we'll be flying the South African flag high. And again, thanks to the sponsors and thank you for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure to have young, talented people coming through the ranks and making a name for themselves on the international stage. I tell you, this is where Ryan is going to be competing. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for coming in today. And all the best next week. Huh?
Thank you.
Now, before we go, just the latest update on the cricket. The United Arab Emirates, of course, they've set Ireland a tough target. It's 278 to win their allotted 50 overs. Ireland, well, they've just started batting. And I can tell you this, UAE, they've got a pretty good bowling attack. They've got lots of pace. Bit of swing there as well. 4 for no loss in the second over. It should be a cracker, humdinger of a finish there. You can watch it on our sister channel on SABC Sport. Now, Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show then repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. We also stream live on YouTube at that time with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, this is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.